How's it going, everybody? And welcome back. We're doing a tech support Thursday a day early. It's actually Wednesday, but tomorrow, which is going to be March 7th, I will be participating in a live stream with a friend of mine, InfoSec Pat. He's got his own dedicated YouTube channel where we will be talking about labs and networking and things like that. So hopefully that you guys will be able to tune in. I'll post about it on the channel as well. But I figure, talk about it real quick here in the beginning of the video. But the big thing is that I wanted to go answer your questions. There's only a handful this week, so it'll be a pretty quick TST session. But before I get into any of that, I just want to talk about some stuff that some of the personal stuff that I've been going through lately, and just highlight there's some things in terms of like personal wellness and things like that. So, me personally, I have historically, as most of you guys know, been an IT guy for the better part of the last 15 years. So, one of the things that ends up happening when you're an IT guy is you spend a lot of time in front of a computer sitting. And so, back when I was probably in my very early 20s, late teens, somewhere like that, I was pretty skinny. Like I've actually found a picture of myself the other day, where my oldest son, who's now 21, he was probably within a month old, I think. So you gotta think back, I was 20 years old because I'm 41 now. So I'll be 42 here pretty soon. But the I was looking at the picture, and I was super super skinny. Maybe 150 pounds, maybe 145. I was a super skinny guy, 5'10", 5'11", depending on the day. So over time, I just naturally attributed my being skinny to just genetics. My mom and my dad were both on the small side. My dad put a little bit of weight on when he got a little bit older. He got to be about my age, but at the end of the day, he was still a pretty small guy. So same thing with my mom. She's on the small side too. So the as time was going on, and I was starting to get a little bit older, naturally, like certain jobs would require me to be more physically active. So over a period of, I'd say probably my mid 20s to probably my late 20s, maybe 30, I started to put a little bit of weight on. I probably got to maybe 160. So, and but I never paid attention to weight. I never paid attention to the scale, what I was eating, body mass index, fat. What my body fat ratio is. I didn't care about any of that type of stuff. At the time I was working a lot because I had a growing family. I had two young kids. And I had a married, and I had a house to take care of. So I refer to it as being front side focused. My primary focus was on making money and being able to provide for my family. So that type of stuff went to the wayside. Now, it wasn't until I got to my late 20s that it became evident that the jobs that I was doing, which were historically like warehouse work, driving around in a forklift all day, things like that, that I realized, when you're working, on average I'd put in 50, 55, 60 hours a week. So it's like you figure you work Monday through Friday from, instead of working an 8-hour shift, you work a 10-hour shift. So 2 more hours, no big deal, and it's overtime. And then you work a Saturday for 8 hours. So by the time I was said and done, I was working, 58 hours a week on average. So 18 hours of overtime. And so it helped with the overtime to supplement what I wasn't making during the regular 40-hour work week. So that was okay for a while. But then as my kids got older and my expenses grew, and then we had, there was one thing that I've listened to, like financial advice as of recently, and I'm not talking within the last like week or two. I'm talking like, the old adage is to always have a little bit of money put aside in case something breaks. Whether you got car problems, what have you. The refrigerator breaks. You need to have like a slush fund essentially of an emergency fund where you can, if you need to, you can go out and spend $1,000 and it's not going to be taken out of your budget. So I started to build that out, but I realized that I didn't have a whole lot left over. So that's actually what made me get into the IT industry. And so one of the things that ends up happening is when you spend a lot of time sitting in front of a computer. Now, for the first, I'd say better half of the first portion of my career, the first like 7, 8, 9 years, it wasn't that big of a deal. I really didn't care too much about how I looked. To me, I was more focused on, I want to get this certification, I want to get this raise, I want to get this promotion. I was trying to build myself up in my career, and so I won't say my health took a hit because I never felt like I was never really depressed, right? And so that was my my litmus test, if you will, of am I okay? And for the most part, I would say, yeah, I'm fine, I'm good. As long as kids were good, the wife and I weren't fighting, the bills were paid, I was, for all intents and purposes, I was good. I never had anything really to complain about. So, but as time went on, it was probably 4 years ago, maybe 5. Yeah, probably about that point in time. I don't know if you guys paid attention to it, but at least here in the U.S., there was this big barbecue craze. And I'm like, well, let's try this out. I'd never really been a big barbecue fan. I mean, I liked barbecue, but we're talking 2018, 2019. So I started getting more and more into barbecue. Like, I was just more of a fascination. You could take a big piece of meat and you can cook it for several hours. So, but then again, I wasn't doing anything for myself from I guess you could say, a wellness perspective, not a mental health thing. My mental health, to me, like, that has never been an issue for me. I've always been able to, lock into something and focus on it and stuff like that. And I've never felt, like depression, that type of stuff, sadness, not feeling adequate. I've never had any of those thoughts or feelings or anything like that. It's, but it was one of those things where over the course of 2018 until probably the last year and a half or so, I started to noticing my gut was sticking through my shirt. And when I would look at myself from the side angle in the mirror, I noticed that my gut was sticking out further than my chest was. And I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm okay with that. And at the time, like, a weight loss, that was never really a conversation I would have ever had with you. So, or like wellness for that matter. But, so I was looking at myself in the mirror and I wasn't really happy with the way I looked. And so I was just like, well, I don't really know what to do with that, because I was too busy with other stuff that took priority, I guess you could say, over wellness. So, but I didn't, like, when I say wellness, I mean in terms of I wasn't sick, I wasn't going to the doctor on a regular basis, wasn't on medication to control a particular thing, like I don't have heart problems or anything like that. So to me, as long as I wasn't sick, laying in bed, blowing my nose or taking medicine to try to get rid of the headache or the whatever body ache, fever or like flu-like symptoms, as long as I never had any of that, I figured I'm a healthy guy for the most part. And it wasn't until I started noticing I learned this term called skinny fat. I didn't even know that was a thing, because to me that's an oxymoron, like thunderous silence or girly man. But I was, how Big Brother and Meta, they all listen to everything that you say. Even if you can say something and your phone responds without you touching it, they're listening. Same thing with like Alexa and all that type of stuff. So, anyway, I we all know it. We just, what do we do about it? You limit the amount of exposure to it as best you can. So I made a comment out loud. I was like, I looked at the mirror. I was by myself. I looked at the mirror and I held my gut, and I'm almost like, man, I'm starting to look like Fat Bastard over here. And I'm sure if anybody's ever watched Austin Powers, you know who Fat Bastard is. So now granted, I wasn't anywhere near that size, but to me, in the way that I viewed myself as a man and my physique, I was like, I'm starting to look a little chubby, and I didn't like the way I looked. I was actually very I stopped taking if we were going on vacation and we are going to be out at a water park or out on the water. As I'm a big water guy, I like boats and fishing and water skiing and tubing and all that type of stuff. I'm definitely a water guy in that respect. Like when I get a little bit older and I'm looking to back off and working 40 hours a week and I'm looking towards more retirement, you're not going to catch me in the woods, secluded, sitting in front of my computer watching the stock market. You're going to catch me out on a boat, we're on a sandbar, relaxing, chilling, doing stuff like that, getting out and being active. Like that's what I see my retirement looking like, is getting out and doing things. Because I spend a lot of time in the house glued to the computer to get myself where I'm at. So anyway, so I looked at that, and this was a little over a year ago, and I stepped on the scale. I never really stepped on the scale, and I stepped on the scale, and the scale gave me a number reading back that I had never seen before. Now I had my oldest son. He's 6'4", probably, if I had to guess, 250. He's a bigger kid. So the funny thing about it was when I stepped on the scale and I looked at it, that was the first time in my life that I had ever hit 190 pounds. And I was like, what the heck, man? So you have those little moments where the light bulb goes off, or something in your mind switches on, or what have you. It's just like, I am not happy with that. I look down and I happen to be a big fan of bodybuilding. Not necessarily I like watching the videos. I'm like kind of fascinated that there are people on this earth like the Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, the Seth Feroci's, the Phil Heath, the Hadi Chupin, the Chris Bumstead. I follow up pretty closely. As a matter of fact, this past weekend was the Arnold Classic in Columbus, Ohio, and Hadi Chupin won the Open, and Wesley Vissers won the Classic Physique Mr. Olympia, or Arnold. So I follow pretty closely. I know a lot of the big pros, not personally, but I follow them. So I was like, okay, well, what does a professional bodybuilder do when they're done with their off season? Meaning they've done eating a ton of food, they're done doing their heavy workouts, and they're now, say, 20, 24 weeks, 5-6 months out from their competition, which, Mr. Olympia, the Arnold Classic, the New York Pro, the Tampa Pro, the Houston Pro, whatever show they might be going after. And there's a lot more pro shows out there than that. But so I started watching some of these guys, and it was like, okay, what does a professional bodybuilder do in order to start dropping down their weight? And what they start doing is they start backing off the calorie intake, and they start to increase their moving around, and so I never paid attention to how much I ate. I never paid attention to how much I worked out. I never paid attention to calories in, calories out. And so I hit that 190 mark on the scale, and I'm like, okay, well, what do we got to do about this? So my first thought was like, well, I need to start working out. So I started working out, and it took a little while. I was not in any really good shape. So I started working out again, and I got a gym membership, and it was about a year ago or so that it really kind of hit me, and because during the winter where I live, I would spend a lot of time skiing, so I figured that was going to keep me active. So, and it did for the most part, But after a certain period of time, it's just not quite enough. So fast forward, um, so March until so I had to like figure out what that was going to look like for me. And it wasn't like, okay, how do I lose the weight? I started to from March till April of last year. I think I dropped maybe 5 pounds, but mentally I was not ready for that part of the drop, because like I was always hungry, and I was always irritable, and so then I was just like, this isn't working. I had lost a few pounds, but I mean, on average, the average person over a 90-day period of time, depending on how busy they are and their diet, you can swing 5 pounds pretty easily. I mean, the average person swings 5 pounds between the end of summer and Christmas. What do you do at Christmas time? People tend to eat more. Um, and they're less active, therefore they put on a little bit of weight, and then once it becomes nice out again, they're more active, they're moving around more, they're burning more calories, therefore they start to drop a little bit of weight, they look a little bit better. Yeah, you know the story. Everybody that's ever lived a year on this planet knows what I'm talking about. So I said, you know what? Instead of doing that, because like all the bodybuilding videos I was watching, and then all like the food videos that I like to watch. I'm a huge barbecue fan, culinary arts. I like watching how to make this and make that, and because I like to eat, right, and just like anybody else does. So I decided to all the pros that I was following, even though I know there's no chance of me ever looking as big as those guys do, because of the fact that I'm like older than 95% of them, and like I don't that's not my goal. I have no desire to walk across a bodybuilding stage and pose and have some people judge me. So that is not what I want to go do. I just want I want to look better than I did. So I started doing a bulk, if you will. So I kept eating about the same, and I started working out more, which actually increases your metabolism because you're starting to burn more calories. And the more muscle mass you have on your body, the more you're going to have to, the more protein you're going to have to take in order to maintain that muscle and grow it. So, but I really wasn't paying attention to it. Like my head was, well, let me go to the gym and work out. That will help me lose weight. That's not the case. There's a saying that I've heard quite a few professionals say, that abs are made in the kitchen, and you can't out crunch a crappy diet. Like, okay, well, what do they mean by that? So, just like anything in life that I've gotten into, whether it's IT, playing the guitar, which I've got a whole bunch on the wall over here, or anything like that, in order to understand what's going on, you have to understand some of the psychology, some of the physiology, and then understand some of the science. So I started digging into it, and it was over time, right? It wasn't any big hurry, and it was the middle of winter, or I'm sorry, summer came, and I was still kind of sluggish, and the big turning point for me was when I went to go put on my shoes one day. Like I got out of the shower, was getting dressed. I went to go sit on the side of my bed. I leaned over to put my sock on my foot, and when I went to go do that, I had to like hold my breath, or I'm sorry, I had to release all the air in my lungs to let me get close enough, and I had to overextend my shoulders to get down to my feet. And then what was in the way? My gut. I mean, it wasn't very big, but to me it was still there. And so I was just like, okay. So I started looking up specifics to that. So, but then again, I wasn't terribly serious about it. Like there was no that switch hadn't been flipped yet. So I was like, all right, well, crap. What do I do? So I was still sitting around the 190 mark. I would go down a little bit. I would go up a little bit. My diet wasn't right. I wasn't like, if I wanted to legit bulk, I wasn't eating more calories than I needed and working out to try to grow muscle and burn body fat. So I just kind of was like, you know what? I'm just going to go through the paces for right now, and then once it starts to warm up, I will start to change that up. So I got a little bit more serious towards like Christmas, Thanksgiving. I started doing more research on it, and then fast forward to the middle of January. So I figured from January 15th through April 15th, that's going to be 90 days, I will attempt to start doing my first major cut. And so what I started doing was, and it took a little bit of time for me to figure out what worked. So the first thing that I did was I removed any like sugary drinks. Like I removed iced tea, I removed soda. I stopped drinking. It took a couple of weeks for me to wean myself off of it because I started getting headaches because of the caffeine withdrawal. But eventually I started to pull that back. I started to feel a little better. I started sleeping better to the point where I would, instead of going to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and getting up at 7 or 8 o'clock, and then let me just slam Mountain Dews and iced tea and coffee all day. I'm not really much of a coffee drinker, but and just slam a bunch of caffeine down into my system. I was always a little bit, like I want to say lethargic, but I was always a little sluggish. Like I was always a little tired. I would find myself falling asleep during the middle of the day, even though I had just had caffeine. So it just wasn't good. So fast forward a little bit, and I was able to remove caffeine completely. So basically, it's just these 20 ounce or 18 ounce things of water 5, 6, 7 times a day. So to try to increase my my fluid intake. So and that's what I've been doing. So that was the first thing I did. I cut that out, which also removed carbs, which brought my carbs down. I started to lose weight a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. So I was trying to figure out what worked. But I was still being very static in my day. I wasn't moving around a lot. So I was like, okay, let me take a one meal away. Instead of eating 4 times a day like I was, 10, 2, 6, and 10, I would start to eat at, I'd eat 10, 2, and 6. And figure I'd just take the last meal of the day out, no big deal, no one's going to miss it. Well, I found it hard to sleep because I was hungry. By the time I would go to bed at 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, my stomach was growling and it was time for me to eat, but it was bedtime. And I didn't want to eat a full meal and then go to bed because then you're not supposed to do that. So what I ended up doing was I adjusted my schedule, and then I got turned on to this thing called intermittent fasting, where I was like, okay, well, let's figure this out. So eventually what ended up happening was I rotated my dial. Well, in this case here for you, it'd be forward. So instead of eating at 10, my first meal would be 2 in the afternoon, then I ate at 6, and then I ate at 10. So I started doing that for about a month-ish, and I started to notice the weight starting to drop. So, but it wasn't very fast. It was a pound or 2 per week, and because I was removing the calories. So that, I was like, okay, cool, that's working. And then I was like, all right, well, what's the next step? So I continued watching more and more content around weight loss and what you need to do. And what the common theme was you need to start moving more. I'm like, okay. So what I started doing was I would get up in the morning, and I have a treadmill. I moved the treadmill that was in my garage into my living room, and so I started to walk on that. At first, it was like 15 minutes because that's like all I could. At like 7 o'clock in the morning, that's all I could muster was 15 minutes. Over the course of a couple of weeks, I ramped that up to half an hour, and I was drenched or was sweating pretty good, I should say, by the time I got to half an hour. So I was like, okay, this is working. And then I started noticing that I was starting to lose a little bit more. It was a pound or 2-ish pounds a week. And that brought me down to the low 170s. I'm sorry, the low 180s. I was like, okay, this is starting to work. So I've continued that down until this morning. Today when I woke up, I got up, and obviously the first thing most people do is you go to the bathroom. So I relieved myself, and then once I was done, I stepped on the scale, and for the first time in I can't tell you how long, the scale said 176. So I'm down 14 pounds since basically the middle of January. So almost 2 months it's taken me to lose 16 pounds. 14 pounds. So I'm like, okay, that's steady progress. I'm shooting for 10 pounds a month, so I'm a little light there. So that just tells me that I need to make a tweak. I need to increase my movement in order to help with that. So my goal is by the end of, and I have 5 pound increments. That's what I'm working on right now. So my next goal is to hit 175. Once I hit 175, my next goal after that's going to be 170. And one of the things that I have to do every week, and I do it, I try to be consistent with it, is I take one progress picture every week. So I take a front facing picture and I take a rear facing picture. So I take a picture of my back, I take a picture of my front, and that lets me see over time. Like, okay, I can see some like a little bit of fat loss there, and then I've noticed when I'm in the when I'm doing stuff without a shirt on, and like in the bathroom, I'll look in the mirror and I'll notice that I'm starting to see a little more definition in the muscles and stuff like that. I'm starting to see a little more muscularity. Things are starting to show a little bit more, and so I'm starting to see a little bit of more abs. I'm starting to see a little bit more in the chest, a bit more in the arms. The veins in your arms will start to come through because there's no more body fat there. And so I've been tracking my body fat percentage, and that as well has been continuously dropping. I was at like 24%. Now I'm down to 2021. So, but I'm measuring it on my watch, and then I also have it's a cheap one, but it's a body fat caliper, or a skin fold caliper, and I have a little measuring guide for it. What the point being is, by combining some stuff, you can make it happen. Picking up where I left off, I had to take a couple hours break between meetings and doing some family stuff. But what ended up happening by going through that process is by changing up the diet and not necessarily eating cleaner, but eating. I've always tried to eat clean, so increasing my protein intake by moving more, walking more, mainly walking. I maintain a regular regimen of working out, so I lift weights 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and I try to walk for basically it's a 2 mile walk every morning for 45 minutes on my treadmill. I do that, and I do that first thing in the morning. As soon as I wake up, I go, as long as time's permitting and I don't have something else going on. If I have to travel early in the morning to go somewhere, I'll go to bed a little bit earlier, and I'll try to get up earlier to try to get my walk in, so that I've gotten, my 5 to 6, 7,000 steps in first thing in the morning, so that I can get at least the blood flowing. It wakes me up, take my shower, get ready for the day, all that type of stuff. And it's definitely, I believe it's helped with the weight loss. So my goal right now is to get down to 170, and we'll see where I'm at from there. So it's a never-ending battle, and so once I do that, my goal is to then get to lean out, and to finish my cut, but not necessarily be like, I don't really have any desire to be 5% body fat, 6% body fat, to be so lean that you can see the veins and all that type of stuff everywhere. Like, I don't need to be in competition level conditioning. If I could get down below 10%, 8%, 9%, something like that, to know what I look like when I get that lean, and then basically maintain that. So there would be one of the guys that I follow. He does a 90 on, 90 off, where he does a cut for 90 days, especially during the summertime, when it would make more sense to have a good physique. And then once it starts to, or he lives down in Texas, so once it starts to cool off a little bit, he starts to pack on a little bit more weight. So he starts to bulk up again. But he does it so that, but he's also gotten himself to where he wants to be. So he'll bulk up for 90 days. And so his goal is to say, no matter what time of the year it is, and no matter if he's in a cut or a bulk, is to stay between 10 to 11% body fat and 15 to 17% body fat when he bulks up. So he's been doing this now for a few years, and over time he's consistently started to put on a little bit more size. So he's getting a little bit more muscular every time he goes through a bulk, and then every time he leans out, he's a few pounds heavier when he gets down to 10% body fat, 9% body fat. I think he sits right now, he just started a bulk. I think he's at like 170, 172. So he would like to see himself get to like the mid 170s as his target goal for the physique that he wants to have. And I'm like, okay, well that's not a bad idea. I'm sitting about that weight right now, and I'm probably not far from it, but everything when I do the math tells me I'm sitting between 18 and 20% body fat. So I'm working consistently to try to work that down. So the whole purpose of this is just to try to live better, right? I definitely am not looking, like I said, I'm not looking to walk across the stage and do a bodybuilding competition or pose on stage and have a group of 2 or 3 people judge me against a group of other people. I have no desire to do that. But what I do want to do is if I'm out on the water or on the weekend and we're just chilling, I can take my shirt off and not feel self-conscious about the way I look. So I would rather put in the time and effort now and then get myself into a regimen as I get older to do that, so that when I do start to lose, if I'm, let's say I get to 15, 16% body fat and I've hit the 90 day, whichever comes first. That's kind of my goal right now, is to try to get into that paradigm where I bulk up for 90 days and then I cut down for 90 days. And this way here, and I'm sure there will be periods of time where I will be in maintenance for a little while to give my body a break, because you can't constantly be, like if you look at a pro bodybuilder, any one of them, I know Chris Bumstead just won his 5th Mr. Olympia. Derek Lunsford won the open bodybuilding Mr. Olympia. I was following Hunter Labrada, Lee Labrada's son, and he was talking about how after the Olympia in November, which was I think it was the first week in November, the first weekend in November, he took a few months off just to give, he would still work out, but he wasn't like pounding it hard to try to, maintain the physique. He just gave his body, a few months to just recuperate from the training regimen that he goes through. Because if you look at professional bodybuilders that are getting qualified to do the Olympia, because the Hunter won the Tampa Pro, and then he went to go to the Houston Pro, and he lost to Andrew Jacked. So when he lost to Andrew Jack, came in second place, he was already qualified for the Olympia. So, and then Andrew Jack qualified for the Olympia, I believe, at the Houston Pro, because he came in first. So these guys are all giving themselves time off, and in the beginning, once they've hit their pinnacle of the year, they give themselves a few months off just to recover, and stuff like that. Because if you're lifting weights all the time, you're eventually going to tire yourself out. So I probably will go into a maintenance phase, and yes, I'm very, very aware of the fact that these guys are pounding steroids. To what their cycles look like, what they're taking, I have no idea. I have no interest in dealing with any of that. All I know is there's no way that the average person, unless they've been lifting consistently for the past 6, 7, 8 years, is going to have a physique even close to Chris Bumstead. And they consider him classic physique, but if you really look at it, he's pretty muscular. So in terms of how that comes into play, it's I don't have any desire to be that big. Chris, in his off season, I think he's weighing in the mid 250s. So, and on stage, I think his weight limit, I think he can be 242. I think is what his maximum weight is. So, when you think about that, I think Chris is like 6'1". So when you take that into consideration, he's a little bit taller than I am, so he can carry a little bit more weight. I'd have to do a lot of weightlifting in order to get even close to that weight. So, and it's not feasible. I'm 41. There's no way that I'm ever going to become that big. Nor do I want to. Like, that's just a lot of time and effort. So, But really, what it comes down to is um, trying to increase my wellness, maintain my weight, maintain the way I look, and it just they say 90% of feeling good is looking good. So if you look good and you feel good about yourself, it'll be that much easier um, to I don't want to say stay happy, but if you look good, you're more than likely going to feel good. So not always 100%, but you guys get my drift. So at the end of the day, that's what I'm doing when it comes to my wellness and stuff like that, so that down the road, once I'm done with, I shouldn't say done with YouTube or done with working in IT, but once I back off and I'm not as heavily involved in it, and I've accomplished all the goals. That's one thing that somebody asked me the other day, like, what are your actual, like, long-term goals for your authoring books and recording videos and things like that? And the answer is very, very simple. So, my youngest son is in high school, and we're coming towards the end of his freshman year. So I've got roughly 3 years until he's done with high school. So all of his sophomore, junior, and senior years. So my goal is between now and the next 2 years is the time frame. So I'd like to have it done by the end of 2025 is my goal. So it's giving me a little over a year and a half. Is to knock out my service provider CCIE, knock out the CCDE. Those are my two main goals. And I plan on writing content in a book form and then recording videos around that content. The other thing that I want to go do is write a book for VMware Data Center and then VMware NSX. So those are my four big goals right now. Service provider workbook, service provider video series. CCDE for the lab exam so I can get the DE, and then doing a book and a video series around that. It's going to be a little bit different because it's not a configuration exam. Do the same thing with VMware Data Center. Go through whatever the most recent version of ESXi is and go through all of that. Once that's done, then be writing a book at the same time. Then video series to accompany that. Same thing with NSX. Go through NSX, write the book, video series, and then all of these will be products that you guys can access. The videos will always be free on YouTube. It's the books that will cost you because they take a lot more time and effort to write. But they also help me. They also enable me to make sure that by going through the book, that the videos come out well and that everything works. It's kind of like me pre-vetting the book, the videos by doing the book. So that's my goal, but it won't stop there. There will always be something cooking in the background. I know, like, I might dive into AWS. I might dive into Azure. I might dive into VDI for VMware. I might dive into Microsoft Server and go through and play around with those technologies. So I will always be having my hand in some sort of technology. It's just how my brain works. It's what I understand. And I found an industry that I feel like I'm good at. So that'll be the main thing. So I know this is kind of a longer video, but it's getting to be kind of long, so I'm going to try to wrap it up here in the next couple minutes. But at the end of the day, the whole point is to always have something that I'm working towards that's going to have a positive impact on me and the community. That's the main goal. So my personal wellness, if you don't take care of yourself, nobody can do that for you, right? So if you're not eating well, you're not exercising, you're not working your body out, the most important muscle in your body is in between your ears. And if you're not, if you're exercising it, but you're not exercising the rest of yourself, then you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. I'd hate for somebody to be like, man, I got this going on now. It's just like, just get up and move around a little bit, man. And try to start moving again. Moving has been probably the best thing I've done for myself in the past year or so. But I'm a very big believer in that. I've actually been tempted to start my own, I want to say my own lifestyle YouTube channel where it's just a day in the life of Rob on a regular basis. Like maybe I release a couple videos a week that's not technical focused. Maybe it's just me, meal prep, working out, um, you know, my thoughts on a particular topic, stuff like that. I've been kind of kicking around that idea. I don't know exactly if I'm going to do that yet or not, because that's just maybe that'll come down the road once all of my big endeavors are gone, like knocking out the CCIE, the CCDE, and the books over the next couple years. Um, those will come and be eventually they'll run their course. They'll be done, and I'll do small updates over time. But it won't be the big, heavy investment of time and effort that it is right now. So I'm trying to grow the channel to where it's a wealth of information for anybody, and then I can always come back when either a new blueprint comes out or a revision happens. I look at the blueprint, and then I update the workbook, and then I update the video series to include those additional topics. It'll just be a maintenance type of thing at that point in time. But the benefit will be to you guys. It helps me with learning how the technology works and playing with it, so I can stay current, as well as hopefully helping you guys out. So let's go ahead and knock out some of these questions that are here. So question is, yeah, I typically say thanks but no thanks when people try to argue the differences in terminology. Okay, I forget what I said, but yeah, apparently it makes sense with you too. Sharing your experiences in such an easy and effortless way is priceless. There's a lot to take and unbelievably encouraging and motivating. Oh, you're welcome. Promo is better than SM. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but okay. I'm your student from Algeria, like the other side of the world. Huge thanks. I will keep sharing my progress in the comments. Sweet, good luck. What keyboard are you using? What is this thing? I don't even know. I think, is this Razer Ornata Chroma? Yeah, it's a gaming keyboard that changes colors. It actually was, funny enough, and I have a Razer Basilisk. Yeah, Basilisk with a 26,000 DPI optical mouse. They're gaming mouse and gaming keyboard. I'm not a gamer though. Funny enough, my oldest son, he works full time now. He's got adult money, so he went out and he bought. He's got a bunch of different stuff on his computer. He and I worked on a computer for him. He custom built his own computer a couple years ago. So all RGB'd out, no water cooling. But he and I worked on that. And then he had the Razer keyboard and the Razer mouse sitting there, and I was dealing with like the old fashioned. It's probably not going to show, but I've got the old fashioned on my work computer that's just to my right here, because all I have to do is pivot to my right, and I can be in front of my work computer. The cheap the Dell keyboard and the cheap Dell mouse for work. I mean, I don't need anything else like fancy. I do nothing fancy with the mouse. I mean, it's just your standard mouse, right? There's nothing spectacular about it, except for when the cord gets pulled. Anyway, so there's that. Great video that clarified so much. You're welcome. Thank you for all your videos. Thank you. I think there was another comment that came through. Yes. So how big is too big for an area 0? So in my experience, how big is too big? Well, if you don't do anything to the area when you're deploying it, I think Cisco's recommendation, if you go through the frequently asked questions, so if you were to pull up Google and you type in the Cisco OSPF FAQ, review frequently asked questions, I think it's in here. So you literally just Google the Cisco OSPF FAQ, frequently asked questions, and this will teach you a lot. Um, let's see. I don't want to sit there and read through all of them. Area. I don't think that's gonna do the job. Yeah, so it's the cool thing about this is that when you go through it, and I've read through these a long time ago, um, there is, I don't see anything specific to that, but at least, so there was a Cisco Live OSPF discussion that I watched a long time ago. I'm not even sure if it's still available, but it basically was like, if you hit 50 routers in your OSPF area 0 and you don't do anything anything to optimize that, like prefix suppression or point-to-point links or things like that, to where you're only dealing with loopbacks, then you're I think they said 50 routers. But I know there's service providers around the world that are running bigger area, a larger number of routers than that in an area 0, and they had no problems. But it's really going to depend on the size of the box. So is there a limit? I'm sure there is, but I've never seen one. Thanks for putting out this series. You are welcome. So that's pretty much it, guys. I wanted to go through this again. Tech Support Thursday is going to happen on Wednesday, because tomorrow I am doing a live with InfoSec Pat, where I will be on his channel with him. And as a matter of fact, I'm actually in the process of talking to him right now, because he asked me if I have everything that I need. So he and I will be going live tomorrow on his YouTube channel through LinkedIn, and I'm going to work with him to be able to hopefully go live on my channel as well, so you guys will be able to watch both of us on either channel. And we have a list of things to go over. We're going to talk. It's going to be in networking labs, right? It's going to be how do you build them? And my goal is to be able to show you guys, my home lab a little bit, talk a little bit about how you build the labs, how do you work your way up in from CCNA to CCNP to CCIE. What should you have in the back of your mind in terms of how do you build your labs? What complexity should you be trying to achieve? Stuff like that, because very few people, when they even attempt to go like CCNP, they will go take it so far, but they tend to pump the brakes when they get to a certain part of their journey, and a lot of times it just comes down to, I don't know what else to potentially try, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the nature of the beast. So my opinion on it is actually very, very simple. If you're in a situation where you need to be able to take something a little bit further, and there's really no good guidance on the lab, you need to do is understand the technology you're trying to roll out, what the complexities are for it, what are some validated designs some validated designs that technology was purpose built or works well in, whether that's hub and spoke, point to point, ELAN, E-tree, things like that, and then start playing with it. So I'm pretty confident in saying that most of the CCIEs out there, myself included, that the first time we've learned how to do something, we didn't have the right design in place when we were trying to lab it up, and we learned something as we were going through it. Like last night, as a great example. So I was in the middle of writing the core BGP section of the Service Provider Workbook, and I wanted to test out TTL security with eBGP peerings. So my goal was to do an eBGP multi-hop peering I've got a configuration set up, and I'll give you just a sneak peek of what that looks like. So this is the core routing topology that I have for IPv4, IPv6 core routing. No MPLS, no segment routing, just straight IP routing. That'll include multicast. That's just straight multicast. So my intention was to put these four routers here into a confederation, and then these four routers into a confederation, and then there's a confederation EBGP peering between R3 and XR12, and there's a multi-hop EBGP peering between R4 and XR13, just to demonstrate that you can do it. And I tried to do TTL security, and on XR, you can only do TTL security on a directly connected peering because there's no way to set the hop count like you can in iOS. So I wasn't aware of that. Now, mind you, I was just like, why is this not working? So I brought over the IP routing on iOS, XE, and XR, and right here it says iOS XR only supports TTL security for directly connected neighbors with the command neighbor session configure with the TTL security command. I'm like, oh, well, the book, like I've got the book up. Like I'm like, yes, I am a CCIE, but the one thing that the differentiating factor between a good engineer and somebody who just plays one on TV is their ability of doing research and getting to the bottom of a particular problem. So I don't care what certification level you're at. You could be no certifications, or you could be like a Roman Rotachev or a Neil Moore or what's that guy's name? I don't want to butcher it. Yoshi CCIE. Yoshi Akayama. I think that's the guy's name. One second. Let me go. Yes. Yoshi. God, where is this? He's from Japan. I read this. Where's his last name? So he's a CCIE plus a CCDE, and I'll bring this over because I haven't met him personally, but I have met E-Man. He's a CCIE agent. But this guy right here, like, if you're like Yoshi, or like, I don't care if you're like no certifications, or if you're like a Yoshi or a Roman Rotachev or a Neil Moore, those are the only guys that I know of that have like 8 CCIEs. I'm just trying to think if there's anybody else. Those are the only guys that I know of that have that many CCIEs. But the bottom line here is that those guys, when they were going through and learning something, a lot of times there was no training for it, right? They were literally just reading whatever the documentation had, and their interpretation, their perspective on the technology was what led them to design and develop a topology in order to learn the technology. And then as they were learning it, more than likely on actual hardware, because a lot of these guys, the virtualization wasn't really a thing, they would learn the technology and implement it, and so they could learn it. Because a lot of times you're having to learn. Like I remember working with Roman quite a few times, and he ended up having to basically teach himself ICE and the Identity Services Engine, right? Because that's what a lot of customers at the time were deploying. I think it was like back in the 2.0 area, 2.2, 2.3, like 8-9 years ago. So there was a lot of that. So in terms of how these guys do stuff, they get innovative. They come up with ingenious ways of learning how the technology works, and they figure stuff out. And then eventually they're able to turn that learning the technology into profit by going out and actually deploying it. And so that to me is the big kicker, and one of the reasons why I don't want to say gung ho per se, but I'm motivated the way that I am, because I look at guys like Yoshi and Roman and Neil, and I'm like, holy crap! Like I feel like I don't even sit in the same arena as these guys because of the amount, just the depth of experience and technical know-how. And now I've talked to Neil and Roman at length on both of to both of these guys on that, and they've both told me very straightforward. Don't ever feel like you're not qualified to have a conversation with me. Like you earned your CCIE, you had the recognition, you had the technical know-how. These guys, a lot of times, just they went out and got a new certification because that's what they were doing a lot for customers. So they just wanted to have the expert level certification as a way of justification, like, yes, I'm the expert, this is why I'm here, yada, yada, yada. So, actually, funny enough, I remember working with Roman on a project, and he was in the conference room, and I walked in, and I gave him a formal request to buy some training on a particular thing because the customer had brought to me what I was on site consulting for the customer, and I was walking them through how we would end up deploying something, and they brought to my attention, well, what if we did this? And I was just like, okay. I looked at it. I go, okay. Yeah, we could probably pull that off. I said, I would need to give me a little bit of time. I'm not very familiar with that right now. I said, but I will be. And so that just goes back to customer-driven requirement or business need or driver. So I ended up bringing that back to him, and I said, okay, I need some training for this because I don't know how to do it. I mean, I could figure it out, but I'd rather just, watch somebody else that knows what they're doing, put it into play, fast track it, take some notes, lab it up give me a week or two, and I'll be in really good shape. Well, he redirected me to some training that he knew about, and he asked me how that particular project was going, and so I was giving him the breakdown as if, I was literally just answering the question that he asked me. I was giving him the breakdown and the reason why I was going to go a particular direction with something, and then it hit me like, duh, this guy already knows this. He's a security CCIE, and I actually kind of joked. I said, why am I telling you any of this? I said, you're the expert here. Like you already know this stuff, and he very I would say very maturely and very what's the other word? He's very cool about it. Like he very much was a big brother type of role, like big brother, little brother, where I didn't know quite as much as he did. He knew that, but it wasn't like it definitely became. He turned the mentor switch on for a second, and he goes, I don't care how many CCIEs I have, I don't care how much experience I've got. It's like if you're bringing me a legit reason and you give me the breakdown for it, and I've told the story before, but it's like if you present to me your reasoning why, it's like I'm not going to say, well, I'm the boss, I have a CCIE in security, this is why we're going to go do it. Like I'll never do that to you. He's like, because your job is to interpret the customer's request and turn that into a solution. Well, here's the thing. He's like, I didn't talk to the customer, you did. So therefore, you have the most up-to-date information that I don't. So you're relaying this information to me. Yes, you are correct. I do know in depth how to deploy a DMVPN, FlexVPN, and then do GetVPN over both of them. So the caveat was that I thought because of the way the customer's WAN was designed and they wanted to implement security over the top of it, I didn't think DMVPN Phase 3, IWAN, that he wanted to go IWAN with it. It was just an upsell in that regard. I was like, I don't think that's going to, that to me is kind of pointless. We don't have enough branch-to-branch communication. And I said, and we can verify it. Like it's very, very clear if we go back through the crypto logs on the routers, there's really no branch-to-branch communication. So DMVPN Phase 3 is kind of pointless. They really just need Phase 1 or Phase 2, depending on how you want to go with it. We could throw Phase 3 in there, but IWAN is completely pointless in deploying it here. So I said, I think it makes way more sense to deploy DMVPN Phase 3, even though we don't really need it. It would be there to have in the event that you need to do a branch-to-branch call. That's really the only thing that they were needed. They were like, if you needed to make a phone call, you'd make the phone call, and then the unicast communication between the phones would be a Phase 3 tunnel. So at least that was my intention behind it. So when we had that discussion, I said, this way here, I said, we can deploy Get VPN. It's this way here, you're not having to rebuild the wheel, and it would give them scalability if they ever wanted to go through with it. I presented it to the customer, and they liked the idea. I said, this will make the crypto, the IPsec, very, very easy to work with. And so it took a little bit of doing, and we ended up getting it deployed, and the customer was happy with it. We tested it on a weekend. We had a guy at a branch office. He made a phone call. I was looking at the router, and up comes the VPN like we expected it to. Everything was working as you would expect it to. And GetVPN did the job it was supposed to. So it was GetVPN on top of DMVPN Phase 3. And it worked great. And the last time I checked, which was just a few months ago, that customer still has that particular solution in play today, which was actually kind of funny to me because of the way that the world goes around. So 8 years later, the solution that I put in play for that particular customer is still operational today. So, and it has worked great. And I was so how was the migration? Because they did a hardware refresh and they upgraded to I think Cat 8Ks. And he goes, the refresh was great. He's like, it went really, really well. He's like, it was literally just a copy and paste of the config from the old to the new, and things came up. He's like, basically the way you described them 8 years ago. I was like, okay, very cool. So he's like, it's worked great. And he's like, we've never really had a problem. He's like, if there's a hardware failure, he's like, what did you tell us? Have a backup config copy of each device somewhere in your your network management tools somewhere, so that if something goes belly up, we have a copy of that particular router's config. We bring the new router in, we dump the config on it, we take it to the location, we power it on, we plug it in, and things just magically come back to life. And he goes, it's very, very simple to roll out. He's like, you really put us in a good spot when it came to WAN scale. And I was like, good, I'm glad to hear that. He's like, you did warn us that if we went above 250 sites, we would have to re-IP address with a larger, go from a /24 to a /23 to allow for growth from 250 to 500 sites. But he's like, we're not going to grow that big. So, but you even had the scale thought out ahead of time. So you architected it well. And so they were really happy with the solution that we put into play. But at the end of the day, that's the whole purpose of the learning of how to put this stuff together. So even though you get guys that are like Yoshi, Roman, or Neil that are multi-time CCIEs that they're, for lack of a better, they're the most down-to-earth and most humble people I've ever met because of the fact that they know so much. They won't act like it. You'll never know. As a matter of fact, when I saw Roman at Cisco Live in San Diego back in 2019, he had a suit jacket on, and it was like 90 degrees outside in San Diego. And so I walked up to him, we shook hands, and I remember I was like, why are you wearing a suit jacket? It's hot out. And he unbuttoned his suit jacket and his ribbons, he was doing the exact same thing Yoshi had. Notice how the ribbons, right? You got your CCDE ribbon, and you got all your CCIEs you got, then your CCIE, I think that's probably the 10-year back then, because this was a long time ago. I think this was 2014. Yeah, I don't remember when he got his CCIE, or when he got to his 8, but this I believe was 2014. But the point being here is, when you look at that, Roman literally had his jacket covering it because he didn't want to attract the attention. I was like, oh well, that's a legit reason. Now, and I'm just kind of standing there. I've got my ribbon on me, and I got my one. As a matter of fact, 1 second. I've got my one ribbon. I'm partially blocking the company I worked for. This is from 2017. This is the first badge I ever got. But you got the CCIE ribbon there, and the orange dot indicated that I got a Pearson VUE exam. So you get an orange sticker on it. That means that you got a Pearson VUE exam. I took Service Provider Written that year. I failed, but still. But But you get this type of stuff, and then this little guy right here, the fork and the spoon indicated you have the food pass. But they change them a little bit every year. But I've kept all of my Cisco Live badges since I've gone, so it's good stuff. And I've also got the name tag for when I was in RTP to take my third attempt at the lab. There's I'm not gonna pan my camera for it, but I've got that. I've got a pin going into my corkboard with all of my Cisco Live badges hanging from it. So it's like my little networking shrine, but it's what I do for a living. So it's my claim to fame, if you will. But so I know this went a lot longer than I anticipated. So, but hopefully this will be a good video for you guys to watch and stuff like that. So, good stuff. I will see all of you hopefully tomorrow on the live stream. Make sure you check out InfoSec Pat in the. I'll try to tag him in the video so that so it's there. You guys can check it out, and I'll catch all of you guys then. So until next time, you guys take it easy. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, feedback, leave that in the comment section below, and I'll catch all of you in the next one.